in 2023, we almost doubled the number of signed representation agreements with the same marketing spend. I'm not saying that can happen for all firms, but from what I've seen, there is a lot of opportunity out there for law firms to really convert more leads into clients.
Hey everyone, Bo Royal here, co-founder and CEO of Pareto Legal, where we help injury lawyers increase their profits with business strategy, digital advertising, and analytics. You're listening to the Pareto Legal podcast, where we feature world-class attorneys, entrepreneurs, and legal experts. And today I am joined by Mark Wickersham, owner and lead strategist of Amasia Consulting, a call center and intake consulting agency specializing in law firms. In this episode, we'll be discussing all things law firm intake, from common issues to best practices to tools and techniques that you can start deploying right away. Mark, welcome to the show.
Hey, Bo. How's it going this morning?
It's going great. Glad to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. Let's dive right into it. So, beginning with your background, how did you end up doing law firm intake consulting?
A little bit about my background. I didn't start with law firms, right? So I started my career in outside sales, realized I'm definitely more suited for an inside sales type role. From an inside sales perspective, I like the instant gratification inside sales could provide. So, figuring out what I would say, the words I would use, my tone, when to be fun, when to be serious, how to overcome objections without really sounding fake. I think I just really fell in love with the whole process. Not sure if this is relevant or not, but I fell in love with infomercials when I was growing up. Just watching the process of what they were trying to do was highly intriguing to me. Anyway, my background. So about 15 years ago, I found myself in a really awesome situation where I was part of a company that grew from 12 people to really more than 200 in about 7 years. So needless to say, I got kind of a crash course in leadership, and I wound up doing 3 different leadership roles while I was there. Okay, so first I got an opportunity to create a second shift sales team. If you ask the CEO, we probably had way too much fun, but let's just chalk that up to me being a little young. But we delivered night after night, we pushed, we created new sales records every single month. From there, the company was growing. We needed people. So I was tasked with creating and running a new hire training program. And this was intense. Every 60 days, we would be bringing in 15 new sales reps. They'd be with me for 2 months, then they'd go on to their teams. But for me, from an inside sales perspective, this really helped me kind of organize the sales process into a coachable flow, which when flowed correctly would allow agents to close and overcome objections without coming off as just a pushy salesperson. It was natural. And I know this might sound cheesy, but it was about caring, right? And when you do something out of caring, instead of just being pushy and getting a sale, your results are much better. And then the last thing I guess I want to touch on about my background, the third thing I was able to do with this company was start and create and lead the retention team. So as the number of subscribers was growing, obviously the attrition was too. But what I really learned from this position, what was awesome about it, was I was able to dive into Salesforce. I was able to learn how to create the actual whole flow of Salesforce, dive into the process. So before this team, the company really had no idea why people would cancel. So using Salesforce, we were able to bucket the reasons, collect the data, and then dive into the actual real root causes. Needless to say, I didn't make a lot of friends in the other departments, but the good news is attrition dropped by a lot. I think the company, last time I checked, they have 330,000 monthly recurring revenue clients. So it was a pretty awesome experience. From there, my brothers and I attempted to create a family business. I do not recommend. Then I took on a project to fix and flip an answering service. We fixed the labor issues, the billing issues, collected a ton of AR, and we sold it in less than 12 months. And then as far as my consulting firm, completely accidental. So 2 weeks after the answering service sold, I was at a wedding talking with an old coworker of my wife's. And he was working with a law firm, had an intake team. They were struggling. Needless to say, a week later, I met with the owner of the firm. set up an LLC. Amasia Consulting was started. And I mean, at least as far as that firm's concerned, I started in Q4 of 2022. In 2023, we almost doubled the number of signed representation agreements with the same marketing spend. And well, I'm not saying that can happen for all firms, but from what I've seen, there is a lot of opportunity out there for law firms to really convert more leads into clients. Does that make sense?
It does, and I completely agree, and that's why we're speaking today, right? Because of the opportunity that a well-oiled intake machine presents to law firms. That is an awesome story, great background. So much is learned being at a company at the ground floor, right? As it's starting to really take off, you kind of learn, like you said, the leadership side, the system side, the technology side. And like a lot of other people in kind of this like legal B2B space, you landed here accidentally, right? You weren't planning 5 years ago to be specializing in law firms, but you identified a need, and now you're working in this industry. So that's
never even crossed my thought process. Never.
You and me both. So let's talk a little bit about problems that you see with law firm intake. I know you speak with a lot of different firms. You assess a lot of different firms' intake systems. What are some of the most common problems that you're encountering today?
All right, I'll try not to be as long-winded with this one. I think law firms just really don't appreciate the need for a high-level intake team, which it's a little baffling to me. So law firms are essentially selling a service that a customer or a client can choose to use or not. And they spend a ton of money on marketing. Wouldn't you want to maximize your conversion rate? And you can't just throw bodies at this. I've seen it tried. You can't hire an army of BAs. Anyway, all right, to list some common problems I've seen. Law firms not tracking their leads. So in turn, you can't really get a conversion rate. Missed calls. Calls just being missed, going to voicemail. No follow-up on the leads. You get an internet lead, you try it once, twice. All right, time to move on. One of the biggest things is no call flow for the agent, right? There's no value for why your law firm is the best fitted for this individual and their specific needs. A big pet peeve of mine is not walking the potential client through the retainer as you would if they were in person. You just send the docs to them and say, hey, sign this 9-page retainer, and everybody's scared. Another thing is focusing way too much on trying to disqualify when you get the people on the phone, I think is another one. Poor quality agents, trying to make a paralegal or a secretary an intake agent. I could probably keep going. That's all I got for now.
No, it's a great list. I kind of want to now have the inverse response, which is, all right, you identified some of the common problems. How can firms overcome some of these problems? All right. So like you mentioned tracking for one, you mentioned personnel issues, lack of a system, not answering the phone in general, it going to voicemail. What are some of the remedies?
Well, some of the remedies are really self-explanatory, like log your leads.
And to be clear, log all of your leads, right? I think, yeah, we've seen some firms where they're only tracking, a portion of the leads. I think you're of the mindset that firms should be tracking every single lead that comes in, even the ones that ultimately get rejected or referred out, so on and so forth, correct?
Yeah, well, that's going to be extremely important. I've asked a couple firms what it was like in the past when most of their potential clients would come into the office rather than call, right? And the answers I got from office managers, attorneys, they were awesome. They were fantastic, right? So they talk about how they greet them with a smile. They ask an open-ended question. They listen to their story. They'll show empathy. They talk about the firm and how they could help them in their situation. And then they'll walk them through the retainer, paint the next steps. At the end of the day, go back to basics. Think of how you would treat someone that walked into your office and simply replicate that on a phone call. And I think that's a good start for a lot of law firms trying to make the move to have a better intake and increase their conversion rates.
Awesome. I want to dive a little deeper into the reporting side of it because we were just talking about logging every lead. What metrics should law firms be tracking for their intake system?
For intake, they can be really, really simple. how many leads overall and how many leads by each intake agent were given. What are the conversion rates as a whole and as an individual intake agent? If you want to get a little bit more detailed, you can get these split by campaign, which I love. Let me give you an example. So if you're a law firm and you have Google leads and you have Facebook leads, see if you can spot an agent that does better with one over another. So certain deliveries can suit different groups of people better. So Jane's delivery is more wholesome and fits the Facebook crowd, where Mike's delivery is more confident and has bravado and fits the Google leads. Does that make sense to you? How you can really get granular with this?
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I haven't heard of firms basically assigning leads by campaign, by agent, but it makes sense if you identify a trend where, John Smith is better at converting a TikTok campaign versus a billboard campaign. That makes a ton of sense.
In the past, Bo, I've actually seen this where we've seen increases on specific campaigns because this is what the agents were used. They were just more used to this specific campaign, and we identified as management which one fits them better based off of the numbers that we were given. So, data is completely necessary. Missed calls, abandon rates are great if you can get them. Now, if you have a phone system that can get call center metrics, be careful not to use them as metrics for the agents to hit. Now, I know this sounds weird. So call center metrics really, they should be just used by management to alert us of a potential issue. So to use another example, so Jane's calls are way too long. All right. So manager A goes and tells Jane that her calls are too long and they should be shorter on average by 8 minutes. Well, Jane cuts out talking about the value of the firm and stops walking the client through the retainer. End of the month comes. Jane's calls are the perfect time, but her conversion rate drops. Why? Well, Jane has a habit of telling her life story on a call because she thinks it builds rapport. So that's why we need to be careful when using call center metrics to use it as kind of a, hey, what's going on, rather than your call should be 9 minutes long. Does that make sense?
Yep, completely. What are 3 low-effort, high-impact tactics that law firms can implement to see an increase in their conversion rates?
Okay. First and foremost, track every lead that comes in. At the end of the month, you really should be able to see a total number of leads, where they came from. Listen, and I've heard this from other law firms, our CRM is way too time-consuming for it, right? They're using, the premise-based needles, and it's just a lot of wasted time. Put it into a Google Doc. It's easy enough to create the columns on the top of a Google Doc for the person handling your intake. Enter it directly in there. If it's a good lead, you can just copy and paste it into Needles or whatever that you're using. Second, missing calls. Get an answering service. If you're worried about too many calls going there and the bill's going to be too high, your phone system can probably do an IVR or a greeting where you can press 1 for new clients, and then you can send just those calls to the answering service. And then make sure your answering service is setting you up for success, not just taking a message and saying bye. And we can go into that at a later date. Third, create a basic call flow that you would follow as if somebody was walking into your office. Friendly greeting, listen to their story, show empathy, show value, guide them through a retainer, walk them through next steps. I think those 3 would make a world of difference if you can implement those 3 pretty quickly.
That's a great list, and definitely plenty of firms out there that are missing one or more of those things within their intake. I want to go a little bit on a tangent or a rabbit hole down on the call flow. And I've learned this from you. So a call flow is a script, but it's something a little more than a script. Can you talk about what a call flow encompasses?
So a call flow, it's not really a script. right? We don't want people reading off a script. We want them having conversations. We want them building rapport, but it buckets things. So a greeting would be a bucket, and then we want to make sure that, agent A is hitting that bucket of a greeting. 2, they're hitting their bucket of listening to the story, actively listening, engaging in that story. In that same bucket would be show empathy, right? So we would bucket that together. And when we're doing our coachings with our individual agents, these are the buckets that we're going to look at. And when we work on hey, what are we going to do next week? We're going to focus on listening to the story and showing empathy, right? Showing value of the firm that you currently work for. That's going to be a bucket. And then next steps, which would include walking them through the retainer, pointing out specifics, and then walking them through what their expectations can be. So when we turn the call flow into 4 or 5 specific buckets, it's easier for us as we continue to coach and get people better and better as we move forward. Does that make sense?
It does. It's kind of like you can correct me if I'm wrong here. It's almost like a decision tree, but with certain attributes that need to be hit for each stage, or what, as you call, bucket, where you're not just rating them on, did you read the words in the script, but did you approach the call in this manner? Like you use the word empathy. That's really important thing to be deploying on these initial calls with prospective clients. Do I have that right? Is that a good encapsulation of what a call flow is?
Absolutely. It's simple. It really is, but it helps organize the agents so they're not just spewing off in 12 different directions, and it helps us as management coach them to get them to where they're, getting better every single week.
Got it. I appreciate you clarifying that for me. Let's talk tools and technologies. We haven't really touched on this yet. I know that you have a lot of experience with different tools, obviously from, the first call center that you worked at to now working with many different law firms that have different CRMs and, live chat tools, things like that. What are some tools or technologies that you would recommend law firms use to improve their intake?
Well, I think this is a tough question to answer because I think it's going to vary depending on each firm. Right. If you're a small firm, implementing Salesforce or Litify it might not make sense. I mean, these tools are very expensive, but there's a lot of cloud-based CRMs out there that are made specifically for law firms. So I guess just to make a suggestion, if you're looking for something new, find something that can, 1, automatically take the leads from your website, the answering service, Facebook, and have them automatically create it as a lead in your system. That way you're not worried about your agents putting it in. Secondly, the ability to stage out your intakes. Meaning, so you have a new lead, you have your attempted contacts, you have your working leads, you have your retainers sent, etc. Right? So this will help agents really give them the ability to organize themselves. Also, this is going to set you up if the CRM has some automation that you can customly build, where you can send text messages for people that you were never able to get in contact with, where they're, you send them a message on day 1, you send them a text message on day 5, and maybe you don't want to keep bothering with it, but at day 30, you send them another message. And it's an easy way to continue to keep this conversation or start the conversation for leads that frankly would have been forgotten in the past. If you have a bigger team and you want call center metrics, they'll be your friend. There's a lot of companies out there that can do that. And I've noticed there's a lot of firms out there that are working remotely. I mean, you can see how much time somebody spent on the phone, how much time they sat ready, how much time they sat on break. We can really see what people are doing better than if they were sitting next to me in a room. Does that make sense?
It does. To kind of summarize it, I think there are like 1, 2, maybe 3 major tools or technologies that you suggested. And I appreciate that you didn't give specific, software names, right? Because there is a ton of different softwares out there. Most of them do the same thing. And I think it's really based on the law firm's needs, their preferences, so on and so forth. But to kind of summarize that, you need some type of intake/case management system, preferably cloud-based. The benefit of that would be that it can connect with your lead generation campaigns so that all of that information is automatically ported into that CRM. You also need some type of call center tech that can like monitor the calls. It can give you data on your agents, so on and so forth. So I think that's one, that's two. Was there a third or fourth in there?
Nothing I can think of right now. Help me out here? Can you think of something I just might be forgetting right now?
No, I think, keeping this conversation specific to intake, those are the big ones, right? Like we could go down a rabbit hole on marketing, we could go down a rabbit hole on ops, but I think those are the main two, right? Which would be big system and call center system.
Yeah, I mean, depending on the CRM, you might need something that does text messaging for you. I think text messaging is great. People, they don't like answering the phone these days. I know I don't. I get a call that comes in, I don't recognize it, it's going right to voicemail. But a text message, I see it and I go, hey, I want to respond to this, and I'll either call or I'll text back. So I'm a big fan of text messaging, as long as it's done properly.
The good news to my knowledge is a lot of those cloud-based solutions do have native SMS functionality. So in a lot of cases, that's just a fancy way of saying a lot of that's built into the tool. But if it's not for some reason, to your point, you should probably figure out how to automate the texting side of things as well. Because like you said, people are a lot less inclined today to pick up their phone when they see a random number calling them. So text can be a good way to get back in front of them, get the information they need or that you need, and go from there. Mark, I really appreciate the time today. I think we touched on a lot of great topics, a lot of great information here. How can our listeners find you online or connect with you?
So if anybody wants to contact me, I'm on LinkedIn. It's Amasia Consulting, or it's mark@amasiaconsulting.com. Feel free to reach out.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mark.
Thanks, Bill. Have a good day.